But there's something I think that's very important for us men, and we're losing this throughout every generation. I think the youngest generation is at the utmost risk for this. But when you talk about my grandfather taught me things, which was very important. Um, he also lived by those principles.
Mm,
He also became a mentor. So not only through talking to me and sharing and sitting down and spending the time, but watching him in terms of his approach, his demeanor, how he dealt with other people, how he dealt with challenges, difficulty, and how he woke up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning to meditate and practice, right? That for me was like, okay, he's actually living it. He's actually doing it.
mm.
And to this day, I say this very openly is they don't make men like they used to.
Welcome to the Skilled Dad podcast. This is the podcast for dads of all seasons to learn the things that they can do and engage so that they can go and equip the next generation for success. Here we sit down with everyday dads just like you to learn from their story, get inspired, and then start getting after it. So we invite you to join in, see what you can take away from this story, and apply to your life on your journey to becoming the Skilled Dad.
Hey guys, welcome to the Skilled Dad podcast. My name's Zach Reeser. I'm your host, and I'm glad you're here. If this is your first time, I want to say thanks for being here. This podcast is all about getting guys together that have the common bond of being dads so that we can equip each other with things that we've learned along our journey, things we've learned that are victories, things that we've learned that are failures, and so that you don't have to go and reinvent the wheel. And secondly, so that you and your crew around you are ever finding yourself in a place where you're like, I feel like I'm the only one doing this. Well, let me be the first to tell you today, if you haven't heard it, you're not the only one that are facing the things that you're facing. Good challenges, tough challenges, and you should have guys to celebrate with you with victory when you have those. So I'm going to say that one at the beginning, and those that have listened know that I harp on that a lot. But today I'm really excited because I've got another gentleman that has a passion for helping men, that has a passion for helping leaders. And when he and I spoke a while back, kind of gearing up for meeting here, it was just fun to have that conversation, be open and have a shared passion that we can drive towards. And he was kind enough to come join me on the podcast. And that is Mr. Purdeep Sangha. Purdeep, thank you for joining me on Skill That podcast.
Hey, Zach, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So we were just recently talking, like right before we hit the record button, and Purdeep is a man of many talents and skill sets, and he's using them well. So sometimes you meet somebody and they have like a whole, like, if you're watching, I have tools. We're talking about that, organizing your tools, but they have a whole toolbox, but they never get it out of the drawer and actually apply it and use it. So Purdeep is applying it and using it in a way to help equip others. He's a best-selling author of his book, The Complete Man. And he also has a podcast, which I suggest you go listen to because it's short, but it's like, how do you jam pack value in a short amount of time? He's doing it. So go check it out. It's the Complete Man podcast. He also has another interview style podcast called CEO Anonymous, which flow kind of with your professional side of coming beside leaders and executives and kind of performance, building people up and helping them optimize what they can do. Is that one right?
Yeah, the CEO Anonymous podcast is interview style because I love interviewing great people, and it's really answering the questions that our audience has. So
Mm-hmm.
our audience sends us questions, say, hey, and they ask, what about this or what about that? And then we have experts or people just of experience and insight that can share wisdom with other professionals. So it's for professionals. We call it CEO Anonymous for a reason because it's anonymous questions that just come in and we try to answer. So it's a good conversation.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I was just telling him I've been listening to the daily and I love it because I've got about a 10-minute drive. So it's typically 8 minutes or less. So I'm like, just plug it in and go. And it's a good way to start your day. So go check that out. And we'll have all of Purdeep's information in the show notes and we'll hit it as well where you can find him. But there's a couple other things that I'm always fascinated about. And I'd love to hear a little more about this. But Purdeep is also a game show host, or has had experience as a game show host.
Well, yeah, it's more of a TV show, I would say, rather than a game show.
Did I say game? Okay, well, TV. What? My note. I'm gonna fire my. Yeah,
I'd I'd
that's
love to I'd
me. I'm
love to
firing
host a
myself.
game show. I think that'd probably be the funnest thing in the world.
I don't know why I was thinking it was a game show. I guess it's just because I was like, wow, that's fun. So I don't know. There you go. It's the morning time. So a TV show host, and up in Canada, right? That's where you hail from. But most importantly, in my book, is a dad of two. And so when we're coming on this podcast, we're all dads, we're all doing different things, but we all are experiencing very similar things. And that's why I love to talk to guys like Pradeep. Hopefully I covered a little bit of what all you have going on, but I'd love to hand the mic over to you and just kind of let you introduce yourself, anything I missed, and any future aspirations about game shows that you might have, apparently.
Yeah, now that you put that on the radar there, that's quite interesting.
We
Yeah,
can
but
make a collab. A game
yeah,
for
you know what?
dad
That's a
collab.
cool idea, actually. I'm gonna write that one down here. Game show. I think we need more of that. I was talking to my wife yesterday, and I'm like, because there's so many series out there on TV, and they need to bring more like family shows back. Stuff that makes people feel good. My kids love Full House, right? So Full House
Yeah.
is a great show. We love to watch AGT, so America's Got Talent. That's one of our favorite family shows. It's
Yeah.
inspiring, right? And I
Yeah.
think as a parent, I'm just jumping right in here as a dad. One of the
Yeah.
most important things that I pay attention to is what my kids consume.
Mm.
And I do that because I have the background in science. And it's always, it's a tough one because there's so much garbage out there in media. But AGT is one of my favorite. I highly recommend everybody doing it. I'm surprised though, up in here in Canada, they just created an AG. Canada's Got Talent. It's not as popular,
Yeah.
but I find that not that many people up here watch AGT. And I'm surprised. I'm like, it's one of our favorite shows. You guys got to watch it.
I'm going to use the V word, vulnerable. But do you cry when you watch AGT sometimes?
Oh, all the time. I think it's, my
Glad I'm
kids
not
kind of
alone.
laugh. Yeah, because, for me, sadness, I've had a lot of people pass away in my life and challenges from that perspective, just like we all have, right? But
Yeah.
we've had a particularly large family. And almost every single year, we have someone close that passes away. And this has been going
Mhm.
on for the last 20 years. So it's like a small part of your heart kind of leaves. And so I've kind of gotten used to the sadness part and how to deal with that. And not that, there are times where I cry, but dealing with it differently. But there's something about someone winning and someone who is inspiring and someone that is able to overcome and tackle their challenges that just makes me cry. And that's why we started this show. It's not my show, openness there.
Yeah.
Mind Your Own Business here in Canada, which is highlighting entrepreneurs with disabilities
Mm.
because these entrepreneurs are truly inspiring. Talking to a normal entrepreneur can get me inspired and doing things, but talking to these individuals, people that are in wheelchairs, can't see, are deaf, have debilitating diseases, and they're running and trying to grow businesses. That for me is inspiring. So coming back to what you're saying in terms of where I shed my tears, that's typically where it is.
It's my son, my youngest son, who's about to be 3. He started saying something which I thought was really funny. I'm putting him to bed and we do a little wrestling because he is just a little warrior. He's like, want to wrestle? I'm like, let's go. But, I'll tickle him, stuff like that. And then we kiss him goodnight. And when I kiss him goodnight, these little whiskers that have gotten slightly longer will kind of hit his ear or something. He'll go, Dad, you're making me cold. I'm like, what? And then he'll look at his arm and gets goosebumps. So whenever I watch the AGT, it's the triumph. It's seeing someone hit that victory. And I'll be honest, it's one of the reasons I like to do this podcast. My son and I had the opportunity to go to a live golf tournament here in Nashville. By the time this episode comes out, it would have been like 3 weeks ago. But it was a live golf tournament, and I had a bunch of these SkilledDad stickers that I have a certain purpose for them. So whenever I see a dad doing something really cool with their kids, I'll just kind of roll up and say, hey, and I get the same response every time. It's kind of like, who are you? Why are you coming up to me? I don't know you. Sometimes it's like, you want to fight, kind of thing. And it's a little awkward. And I'll say, you're doing a good job. And I just hand them the sticker and they take it, they look at it. And it's like almost every time it's like, thanks, man. And it's just totally changes everything. And it starts great conversations. And sometimes those conversations go deep into the pool real quick. There's something about it that just busts a barrier. And when they'll start talking and sharing a little bit of story, and then you hear like maybe where they were and then where they are. And it's that same kind of like, oh, you're doing it, man. Like it's that victory, and it makes me cold in the words of my son. So small tangent, but it's exciting to see victory and to celebrate that and then be with your kids and do that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So AGT and then your book as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I wrote that book in 2020 and I wrote it for a reason. And it's all about victory, right? It's how to achieve ultimate victory, right? Performance, achievement, and victory in all areas of your life. That's the subtitle. And I think that's important for men. I wrote it in 2020, particularly because we're in the realm of business, right? So we have multiple businesses ourselves and we advise other business owners and leaders and organizations. When COVID hit, and things started to shut down, I realized right away that this is going to have a massive impact, particularly on men. And if this continues on, if the closures were going to continue on, it would have had a societal impact, which it has, right? We're seeing it, we're experiencing it now, mental health and all these other challenges.
Yeah.
I basically just locked down and wrote the book in 10 months and we released it. I wanted men to have some kind of a tangible way of actually being able to get through this. And the book, Complete Man book is really, it's about living a complete life for men.
Mhm.
How do you be complete as a man and how do you live a complete life? Our background again is also in science and performance psychology, so we've included some of that. We dispel some of the myths out there, particularly around this whole concept of gender, uh, and neutrality and all that kind of other stuff, right? So I'm very progressive, you can say, from that perspective, but there's a lot of misconceptions, especially in today's society, when it comes to the role of men and what that looks like, and the role of men or women, I should say, and the interactions, because that's confusing people, it's confusing families, it's confusing everybody. And so we talk about the biology behind, the differences between men and women and that kind of stuff too. For any of those men, which I see a lot of, right, struggling in terms of what masculinity is.
Mhm.
And so that's and plus experiences. So I share a lot of stories. So these
Yeah.
are real men with real life examples. I share a lot of my own personal stories, been very open in terms of some of the challenges that I faced and put it in there. And so we've gotten some great feedback. We hit the international bestseller list. And I have to remind myself, hey, look, you know what? I got to talk more about it because I just don't talk about it enough. But we get feedback all the time. Surprisingly, it's interesting to see the things that hit different men, right? The impact
Mhm.
that different chapters have and how men relate differently. And what I've noticed over the past little bit is we are getting a lot of feedback now on the chapter, particularly about addiction.
Mhm.
And and that has it's eye-opening, A, one, B, I didn't expect it to happen. And we've actually had our book now put in addiction clinics and counselors are using it. So I'm happy to say that it's had an impact and I'm happy to see gentlemen like yourself, Zach, in having the Skill Dad podcast, because this is awesome. This ecosystem of men
Mhm.
talking about being a dad, being a husband, being a leader in the community, because we need way more of that. It's almost like we're dealing with this force against men now. And not that we need to push back a little bit, but we got to be a little bit, mindful in terms of how far we're willing to accept this type of misunderstandings of men.
Yeah. I like that term, pushing back. I agree. We need to stand strong together.
Yeah.
And what I'm finding so I've been doing this, now 2 years, and it really initially just started as kind of this thing I always wanted to do. I have some different reasons for that. If you want to hear about that, there's a couple episodes you can listen to or ask me, go to the website and it'll explain it. But ultimately, it was just a way to kind of give back. And then as I got deeper, I'd be curious to see what you found in doing this and in your feedback is that, you know, it might be like stating the obvious, but I'm finding it's not so obvious, is that we're all living these lives. And I kind of said at the beginning of this episode that no matter where someone's coming from or their background or socioeconomic side or whatever it might be, yes, we have a lot of differences based on our experiences, our upbringing, our community that we live in now, our circles. But we also have so much common DNA as being dads that I've found, the guys I've talked to. And that's the part that I want to help reinforce is using that as a way to connect men, because standing strong, we're stronger standing together. That means getting a group of 2 or 3 guys just to start, that you can actually sit down and talk to you and me, like, you're like right here. So I'm looking at the camera, but you're like right here. So that we can talk about those victories, those challenges, those different pieces, because even on the addiction side of things, I've run into that quite a bit too. And one thing I'm seeing a lot of is that, you know, the lack of other people, other men around them, leads to the loneliness. And the loneliness, then, there's so much things. And then guys, are carrying a lot. And I'm with you on that in many ways. And I'm really passionate about that. So I appreciate you bringing it up.
Yeah, my pleasure. I think it's very important for sure.
Yeah. Get me all fired up this morning. I love it. So in the Complete Man, and you're also working with business leaders, entrepreneurs. I mean, you've been listed in Entrepreneur Magazine, Forbes, a lot of different places. But in your work specifically, we'll just kind of say with men, with other dads, what are some of the things that you've seen as maybe a common challenge set, or a common DNA in kind of your world, that you've been able to help guide some people with, that then has helped shift them in a way to then go and perform?
Yeah, I would say the most common one, and this is, I think this is universal, is the challenge that a lot of men have because it's inherent in our being to be drivers, to be task oriented, to want to achieve and want to perform. But then there's that, I use the word harmony because I think that's far more effective because we've also done the studies behind the difference between harmony and balance. How do you be a high performer in your business or in your career or profession, but also raise a healthy family? And
Mm,
that part is the biggest challenge I see of men deal with. And then there's other challenges, right? There's other challenges such as relationships. In fact, I think from our research, what we've identified is 8 out of 10 guys are in a relationship that they're not really satisfied with.
mm,
That's another big challenge. Addiction is another big challenge. But then also not feeling fulfilled within themselves. And that's why we talk about the whole premise of being the complete man,
mhm,
right? And we're looking towards external things to make us feel more fulfilled rather than focusing internally on our character and who we are and the things we learn and how we develop as a being. So these are, I would say, the common things amongst men. And then on top of that, as I mentioned before, the layer that masculinity is kind of a taboo word these days. And so there's a lot of guys out there that just don't know how to be what we call loving and firm or kind and firm in terms of their approach. And a lot of them are just living incomplete lives. So there's so many things within each man that is a little bit different. But if I take a look and I say, what's common amongst all of these men? I would say that many of them are struggling with this feeling of fulfillment internally.
mm.
There's very few men that I come across that truly feel like they are fulfilled. For them, it's a constant trying to acquire it, and they're never quite getting there. As a result, they do things or they're on a path that they're spending a lot of time, energy, money, resources doing, but it's still not getting them to where they want to be.
Would you say so the internal fulfillment side of it is a little bit more almost root cause of the addiction side and the relationship side of things? Then, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, the internal, I would say that is one big aspect because the first thing that we have to identify, and again, I'm very open with myself and or with everybody else in terms of my own personal challenges. True fulfillment does come from within at the end of the day. It sounds cliche, but it truly is because it's all about our evolutionary being, how we look at ourselves and we say, hey, who was I 6 months ago and how did I develop and how did I grow as a result of that? When most guys take a look at what's not happening in their life, what's not working well, they try to change what's not working well rather than saying, how do I change something within myself with thinking or emotions? And now science has even talked about this over the last 5 years. Neuroscientists have said that your brain, basically, in your internal state, is what drives your external world. So your environment is a direct reflection of your internal state. These are
Mhm,
scientists now saying that,
mhm.
right? So if we want to shift things externally, we need to shift things internally. And it's funny how things work when we become more fulfilled from within ourselves. And it's a lot of work, right? It's not
Yeah.
something that happened overnight. Because right now, so many people are shining this shiny object in front of us and saying, hey, in order for you to be fulfilled, you need to do this, or you need to achieve this, or you need to make this money. Right. And I grew up in a traditional household my ethnic background is Indian. And my grandfather, who lived with us, we had an extended family. My grandparents lived with us. He immigrated over from India, just like my dad did. My grandfather was in the Indian army for 30 plus years.
Wow.
He was a military man, but he was also a very spiritual man, the most spiritual man that I've known personally to that depth. And his father, so my great grandfather, was a spiritual teacher in India for 60 plus years.
Wow.
And so this whole element of spirituality has been part of our lineage. And my grandfather taught me mindfulness and meditation and all these different practices and principles. And it's really interesting that I didn't realize that there's a direct, you know, line between discipline and principles and values and spiritual practices and being fulfilled. And my grandfather really brought that home for me because he taught me about internal discipline and principles and values and how that leads to true fulfillment rather than anything else in life.
Hmm.
So, and my grandfather used to say, a simple life is a good life. So as I got older, all these things that my grandfather taught me just came to light. And I was like, okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. But what he did, fundamentally, what he taught me was how to be fulfilled within myself, my character, who I am, and how I develop myself. I've been very solid. And I say this with the utmost humility in terms of being solid within myself for my family, for my friends, for everybody else around me. So I've always been that core person, not because of me, it's because of what my grandfather taught me.
Mm.
And so that for me has gone very far in life.
Well, okay. I want to challenge you on one thing
Yep.
based on what your grandfather taught you. So let's say somebody listens to this podcast or they listen to your podcast or they listen to 500 other podcasts. I would encourage everyone to get multiple sources of information and then make your own decision, right? You find people you click with, but now you're equipped with the knowledge. So he imparted the knowledge on you, just like we're working to impart knowledge on others. But you took the action. Like you took the action and you actually did it, right? So knowledge alone is just being good at trivia, but knowledge plus action now equals being knowledge plus action starts to be effective with whatever you're going towards in your goal. Knowledge plus action plus action plus action plus learning plus action becomes skilled.
Yep.
So I'm not a skilled dad. I am learning every day. I learn from guys like you. I learn from the people I talk about. Skilled dad is aspirational because as soon as I think I've got it, my kid grows up and they just start saying a new phrase. And I'm like, throw it all out the window and start over. But that's the only thing I'll challenge you on is that he imparted the knowledge, but it was up to you to then carry the knowledge and actually apply it so that you could have the
Yep.
results. So something you said in saying that you've been able to master that or to make that effective in your life, and you're saying that in a humble way, I take it very much so. I also say like, hey guys, that's up to us to own it. Like if we're good at something, we don't want to be arrogant, but we want to say, hey, I've become good at this. Here's how I did that. And here's what I have to do to keep going. But we can own it. And the flip side of that, if we're not and we know we're not, let's own that too, because that's a starting point if we want
Yep.
to change.
Yeah, I
So,
think there's a couple of things. If I could just add on to that, because I think you're
yeah.
absolutely right. The integration into life is very important.
Mm.
So I've spent my entire life, and I'm still in school, like academically in university, and I constantly am growing and learning. But that's the one thing I found is being an academic at heart really makes no sense. It's great to have knowledge, but until you actually put it into the practical realm, right? That's where the true results came. But there's something I think that's very important for us men, and we're losing this throughout every generation. I think the youngest generation is at the utmost risk for this. But when you talk about my grandfather taught me things, which was very important. Um, he also lived by those principles.
Mm.
He also became a mentor. So not only through talking to me and sharing and sitting down and spending the time, but watching him in terms of his approach, his demeanor, how he dealt with other people, how he dealt with challenges, difficulty, and how he woke up every morning at 4 o'clock in the morning to meditate and practice, right? That for me was like, okay, he's actually living it. He's actually doing it.
Mm.
And to this day, I say this very openly is they don't make men like they used to. When I look at my grandfather, he was like a true man, right? In the military, very disciplined, right? You know, when it comes to being able to deal with pain and challenges and anguish and all that kind of stuff, but a very spiritual man in tune with himself, in touch. Tons of people in our social circle respected him to such the highest level, because people would try to be confrontational with him and he wouldn't engage.
Mm,
And so it was really interesting to see his level of confidence within himself, where he knew this is just a bunch of BS. I don't need to deal with this,
yeah.
right? If you want to engage in that behavior, you go ahead and engage in that behavior. But mentorship, I believe, is something that is one of the biggest factors for boys to become men, men to become wise, but also for us to be able to lead other men on the right path. Because right now it's social media, it's all these other things where boys are now learning, okay, well, and it's great to have, and I think you said something very important. Absolutely. This is a key part for us too. Find different sources. That's how we built what we've built in terms
Mm,
of our businesses and practices and systems. Is we took a look at different practices, business practices. We took a look at different philosophical practices or spiritual practices, scientific backgrounds to build our businesses. And we said, okay, what works and what can we apply, and what doesn't work in our situation? Perhaps it applies for somebody else.
yeah.
But coming back to this whole piece, I think the one thing as dads we have to remember is there's a certain period of time, particularly when our kids become teenagers, right over the age of 13, because they have their own level of confidence now, or they're building it, and their own set of beliefs that we've had a huge part to play in terms of implanting in them.
Mhm.
But they are now watching more than anything. So mentorship and living by our principles is far more important at that time, rather
Mm,
than just saying, because when we start lecturing, they're going to tune us out. But if they start seeing what we're doing, that's a bigger impact. And
yeah.
this applies to grown adults too, right? This applies to grown men.
100%. No. Okay. Here's a question. When do you think that this changed? I mean, we may not figure out the answer, but like, at what point do you think that this shift happened? Because I see it all the time too. But I see another thing that I need to write down, so I don't rabbit trail off, that I'll come back to. But when do you think that this kind of started to shift in this dance?
You mean in terms of men and masculinity and mentorship and everything?
I think the loss of some of the community of men were that created opportunities for mentorship, because 40 years ago, 20 years ago, even, there weren't like online programs to go and like find mentors, but groups of people to go learn from or things like that. But regarding mentorship, regarding the ability to have people around to learn those things from, grandparents, parents not doing it, I don't know. Like, when do you think that maybe it started?
Yeah, I think there's a series of things that have happened. So I'm just going to ramble off a timeline
Okay.
based on my observations and experience and knowledge. So in the 60s and 70s, there was a whole feminist movement aspect, which was required to a certain degree because, women were being oppressed. They were, they unfairly treated. Absolutely. But it led to this whole nurture versus nature
Mm,
approach. And so at that time, it was more, no, it's how you bring boys up or even girls up that determines whether they're masculine or feminine. So they started to discount biology and more about the nurture side, right? More about society. Both have an impact. That's when this whole concept of masculinity started to change. And
mm,
slowly it's been changing over time. And then now we've had divorce rates obviously hit, over 50%, which is a significant impact on relationships, right? Women then having the ability to earn income for themselves and support families, right?
mhm,
Because now you take that, which was a very big responsibility for men to be the breadwinner, right? Because it's in our DNA to be that protector, to be the provider, right? You can't take that out of us.
right.
Now, two parents having to work. Before it used to be one parent, right?
Mhm,
So now two parents have to work a lot of the times for
yep.
family to be financially sufficient. So now you have both parents working, which has a different dynamic on a family unit.
Mm,
And then families changing from having more kids to less kids. Okay. Now, parents are no longer needed. If you're having 6 kids, yeah, you need your parents around to raise your kids, right? You need grandparents. But
Right.
if you have 2 or 3, you don't necessarily need them. So extended family units have changed.
Yeah.
So all of this is changing from a society perspective and mass immigration, right? And with mass immigration before, there used to be extended families. It needed to be, it was necessary for you to be able to
Hmm.
survive. That's not as required as much anymore. And so all of these things and the degradation of family dinners, right?
Yeah.
All of these things have had an impact on the family unit and men's roles.
Yeah.
So where did this start? That was a big thing that started to happen in the 60s and has been challenging us ever since. But it's more recent now with the degradation of the extended family, which means not having grandparents around, that has had the biggest impact because now we no longer, and with social media in particular,
Yeah.
now kids are no longer needing their grandparents. They can go to social media or the internet.
Which is
That
scary.
it is hugely scary because it's on the internet, it's a bunch of information and much of it is incorrect or inaccurate.
Right.
Whereas grandparents have real life wisdom, right? They've lived through those challenges and experienced those difficulties. And they can tell you because it's one thing to read it, it's another thing to hear it from someone live. And so
Yeah.
that's my perception in terms of what's been happening.
Yeah. And to kind of tap on what you said earlier, it's to read it, to hear it, to be with it live, and then to be shown it over and over. So like I go my frame of reference, I hear it's funny when my dad talks about a lot of the things that he learned, he always references one particular grandpa. And so that was clearly a very important person in his life, but it was a lot of the hands-on skills, the learning. We come from Illinois as farmers, right? So a lot of different things you learn there. But to that, I think one other factor that I'll throw in there, because I'm with you, and there's a couple of books I've read about some of the movements in the 60s and 70s where that kind of starts to shift. The other thing is hypermobility. I mean, the ability to I've lived in several different states around the country, and grandparents aren't necessarily going with us. Now I've got 3 kids. I'll tell you, having grandparents around is super helpful, assuming they're engaged. Um, that said, people can up and leave. Um, Maybe not everyone, and I understand that not everyone has maybe that opportunity, but the ability to do so is 10x or more of what you could do 15 years ago, 20 years ago.
I,
I
I
think it
completely
plays into it.
Yeah, I apologize for jumping in there. You're absolutely right. Like it's mobility, technology, all these things have had an impact. As you were talking, something popped up in my head, which I think, I don't know why I went to this, but it popped up, but it's respect as well.
Mhm.
Respect for our elders. It's almost non-existent now. If you hear how children speak to elders, for example, or even grandparents or things like that, I'm surprised. I'm a little bit disappointed and I'm surprised we tolerate it. It's interesting. I just had this conversation with my son the other day. He was talking to me. He was saying something, and I stopped because there's a balance, right? Right? There's a fine balance in terms of how to raise kids. And I honestly, it's just like you said. It's constantly learn. It's a learning experience for me. It's probably the biggest lesson that I've learned, the best lesson in life, having kids and how to be a better dad and be a better person. And I stopped him for a sec. I said, "Son, who are you speaking to?" He said, "You." I said, "What am I to you?" He said, "You're my dad." I said, "Yeah. So are you going to speak to me with respect or not?" And he got the point. But
Mhm.
we're seeing this with grandparents as well, right? We're seeing this with how we treat elders and just in terms of they're a nuisance rather than actually an asset.
Mm.
In in the Indian culture, it's really interesting. I'm just going to share the small example. So rap and music has skyrocketed in India, the younger generation, and it's an Indian type of a rap, right?
Mhm.
And they've kind of emulated kind of like the Tupacs and stuff like that. So a little bit
Yeah.
behind,
Well,
behind
yeah.
schedule, 10, 20 years behind schedule.
It's less hypermobile apparently, but it made its way out there and now it's rocking or
Yeah,
rapping.
now it's rocking. But I saw this one video where they had I think it was 3 grandpas. And
Mm.
in our culture, right, when we take a look at Sikhs are the ones with turbans and typically long beards, and there's a reason for that, right? I can share the history if we ever get into that, but it's the respect is one important thing because how you carry yourself, and the turban is a sign of respect. And so you have these three older gentlemen that are in this rap video, and at the very end, they're sticking their fingers up, like they're fingering the camera. And I looked at my wife as we watched this. I said, I guarantee you those grandpas don't know what they're doing.
No.
Like they don't know because in the Indian culture, that's not a thing, right? Sticking your finger up. And these are traditional older men. They're not in technology. Like these are guys that are in their 80s.
Mm,
They don't know what that means and stuff like that. Whoever made those videos told these men to do that, right? Finger the camera,
right.
whatever it is. And guaranteed they don't know what that means. Had they known what that means, I'm pretty sure they probably wouldn't have.
Mm,
And so now you have the younger generation who's making this rap video, making these older generations kind of look like I'm going to say it's disrespectful. It's just
yeah.
a disrespect thing. And so I see that in the culture where the Indian culture, it was very much about respecting your elders. Like
Mhm.
from our cultural background, that's one of the core principles is you respect your elders, you respect your grandparents and your parents, and you don't talk down to them or talk to them disrespectfully or do any disrespect at all. And this kind of stuff is happening. It comes back to this aspect of respecting our elders as well.
You know, it's interesting. I'm with you 100%. And I get some interesting looks sometimes when it, it's unbelievable that it's even a thing, but they'll say, yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. And that's, we're in Southern United States. That still happens here. And we're going to continue saying it because it's a form of respect in that sense to acknowledge an adult, to speak with them the right way. But it's interesting that you've got the elder group in a society that's now starting to throw up the birdies, right? They may not know what they're doing, but I wonder, there'd be an interesting study if you look at what happens with Indian community and culture in the next 20 years. Is this their form of what started in our 60s and 70s? Maybe some of our elders started putting up birdies and whatever the context of the time was. The ones that still work in alignment with the community and respect started seeing that from leaders, which then flows down to say, oh, well, this is okay. And
Yeah.
so now you have this whole thing where it's like, well, before, but okay, well, maybe. And then do. So I want to circle, I want to wrap that one up to say like, okay, us as dads, like I can't control what anyone else does. I can't. It's outside of my influence, but I can control what I do. And it's what you said before in the mentorship side is like I can tell them, but I can show them. So like when I'm out talking to people I don't know, and I talk to a lot of people I don't know, it's fun for me. I have the opportunity to show them what it is to engage someone in respect and kindness in society. And I'm careful about the words I choose because I know they're there and I know they're watching. You know, you can let social media run things or you can be part of running things. And the essence of standing strong and standing together for those that align with that idea that we think respect should still be within our communities and have conversation and good dialogue, even if we disagree. No one can do it better than you as an individual. So let's go. Let's do it together.
Yeah.
So, no, I'm with
Totally
you.
agree.
That's so interesting. I didn't know that, but I'm really interested in that. I want to look into it. These things go way too fast, always. And I feel like we could dive into so many things. I just really appreciate all your knowledge and like how you're able to put. I want to give you a compliment, and hopefully it comes off as a compliment. I'm just going to step aside from the show real quick for everybody listening. You should join in. What I really appreciate about what you are able to do is you've gone to different resources and learned a lot, but you're able to put it and package it in a way that it's easy to understand, even on complex topics. And so I just appreciate you for that. Hopefully those listening can go and check it out. But that's what we can learn too. This is skilled dad. We talk about skills, but that's a good skill to learn because it'll help in business. It'll help with kids. It'll help wherever. So I just want to say thanks for leading in that realm. If you ever come off the playbook, let me know.
Yeah,
Sure.
thank you. I agree. I totally appreciate that. I'll take that compliment. Thank you.
Yeah. So in the essence of skills and being a dad, you had mentioned earlier that that's one of the tougher things that you've done, the lessons you've learned. what are some of the biggest things that you've learned, even from your book knowledge and your experience, that when you put it in practicality, you're like, okay, here's being a dad. And here's one of those things that I've loved. So maybe like one of your greatest victories and one of the greatest challenges that you've run into and what you've done to overcome
Yeah,
it.
wow. I would say the biggest thing for me is I have to be like hypersensitive now in terms of how I speak,
Mm,
how I behave, and my approaches to things. So it's just made me that much stronger in terms of being able to communicate because now I'm always taking a look and saying, okay, what is the long term impact of what I say to my kids
mm,
and what I do now and how I react to this? And so it's a great exercise because I've caught myself so many times in terms of maybe it's an underlying tone that
mm.
was maybe sarcastic or maybe there's a little bit of, n- maybe even a little bit of resentment or whatever that is. And I'm going to catch myself and say, shoot, you know what? I think I talk to my wife like that sometimes too.
Mm. You said what I
So,
was thinking. So yeah, thank you for that.
right. So I just have to be careful and more aware, but it's great because every single day I'm learning and I'm learning something new. And I think the other thing too is just if being a dad has been so phenomenal because it's enabled me to go back to being a kid again too. Like
Mm,
that for me, I believe is the best part. We as dads, from my perspective, here's how I see it. We have a number of different roles. We have a role to protect, to provide, right? To be mentors to our kids, to teach our kids. I think that's the most important one. And sometimes we forget about the fun part. And I'm saying this for myself, right? And I know there's a lot of fun dads out there, but just having a fun part is so awesome. So for me, they've been a blessing because I've been able to go and rekindle some of my passions, like remote control cars. Uh,
nice.
yeah, like that's been awesome. Absolutely love it. And then just recently, I bought one of those gel blasters
Oh,
for our family. So
yes.
we just basically I said, "Okay, we're gonna do this," and we went out there and we got the neon ones, and so at night we're out there blasting each other. And I can tell you, man, I've had so much fun. My kids love it. My wife is kind of borderline, she doesn't like being shot, but she's having fun.
That's fair.
But these kinds of things, just making life fun again, I appreciate it. But I think, if we're getting back into the serious aspect, and there's a book out there, it's called How to Raise Mentally Strong Kids
Mm,
but by Dr. Amen. I would recommend every single parent and dad to pick up that book, to read it, to study it. It is phenomenal. And I'm saying this as an academic with a background in neuroscience. It brings in the neuroscience and the practical elements of how to raise your kids because our kids' brains are so malleable, right? They're so easily influenced, and we can literally make or break our kids as dads. And that for me was it's a huge eye opener. And so that book I think is amazing, but just the power that we have and how we wield it and the influence that we can have as dads in this world, I think is phenomenal. So this journey for me, Zach, I can say I am still trying to figure it out as a
mm,
dad. And every single day I learn something new about myself, right?
yeah.
And it's phenomenal, but it's also challenging. Like you said, honestly, I'm right now, if we're talking about a challenging perspective, my son has a little bit of challenging behavior
Mm,
because, um, and my wife hates it when I'm completely open, but he's been raised a little bit entitled, not by me, right? It's typically, I'm going to say my in-laws basically have gotten him everything. And whenever he goes there, he just gets to eat whatever. He literally comes back after 5 days and he's gained 5 or 6 pounds, literally. Right. And so all the work that we've done for months, trying to work on him being fit because he plays soccer,
hmm
kind of goes away in a week. And then he says to me, Dad, I need your help. Like, I don't have this willpower. What can I do?
mm,
So he's got these, it's really interesting. And I'm being completely open and honest now. It's it's
yeah.
it's sometimes it hurts a lot because I see him struggling with that. Like he doesn't even take his shirt off on the field. He goes runs in the bush and takes it off because of how he feels about himself. And I
Mm,
don't push him from that perspective. I just want him to be healthy. But then he's being set up for failure because he's been giving all this food and stuff like that. And sometimes as a father, I feel, it's that hard balance where it's like, where do I draw the hard line? Right?
mm,
Do I say no, you can't go to your grandparents' house? Right? Because of this, and how difficult are these conversations with my wife? Because we have these conversations and she says, yeah. but then she doesn't enforce it with her parents.
Right.
It's a tough thing because now it's impacting our relationship as a husband and wife,
Mm-hmm.
right? So we have a son here saying, I need help. Yet he's very, kids are interesting this way. Their brains are still being developed. They haven't developed their frontal cortex until they're 23 to 25. And so they have the ability, we think they're smart enough to know better, but they don't have the willpower per se, right? Or the
Sure.
cognitive capacity. So what he does is on one hand, he has these open, vulnerable conversations with me. And on the other hand, he kind of manipulates the situation to get what he wants to. So he'll manipulate the situation to get all the food and junk food and stuff that he wants.
Mm-hmm.
Not from me, but from my wife
Mm-hmm.
and my in-laws. And so it's been this balance. And I've been navigating this for the last 6 months to a year in terms of how do I have influence on him? How do I
Mm-hmm.
buffer the influence of my in-laws? How do I draw firm boundaries? But how do I be loving in the same place? And so it's a work in progress, man, and
Yeah.
it doesn't stop, but it's a great learning experience. That's all I can say.
Yeah. And opportunity. It sounds like, that's interesting. It's the grandparent thing, with the treats. I think I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for everyone else, but now I can, let's say that you're not alone, right? And it just depends. How old is he?
He's 11.
Okay. So what I really appreciate is that he actually is asking you for help, right? So he's trusting, like, hey, I recognize this is a thing. So, you know, you play in the business world. It's parenting is a lot of like testing and iterating, right? Because you can read a book on it and it'll some things will really work when you try them with your kid in whatever stage they're in, and then that can change. And your kid's I have 3 different kids, 3 different personalities, like all of them. But at least you recognizing kind of what the symptoms are. So then you can work through, and there's a cool opportunity for you to have opportunity to build something and work through something with your wife in a positive way, and potentially in-laws too, right? I'm not going to ask about your relationship with in-laws because this is a podcast in a public forum, but we can talk offline. But there's seasons and stuff with that too. Um, and so I hear you on that challenge. What's cool is that he's recognizing it, and there's an opportunity to, like, hey man, like if this is bothering, I've had this with my son, and you know, it'll be good. And then we regress, and then we come back and we regress. It's like, hey, well, what are some ideas you want that we can work through together and go after that and change, and like, so I have lots of ideas on it, but I appreciate you sharing it. I know that's a thing. But it's cool that he's recognizing, and it seems like it creates a good opportunity for you to troubleshoot,
Yeah.
um, and build that relationship, because shared experiences build relationship, and he trusts you and he's telling you that. So that's killer.
Yeah.
I
That's
love
that's the
that.
good part about this.
Yeah. Uh, well, it's already like we're there, man. Like, and it seems like a 5 minutes for me, but it just goes so fast. But I appreciate this. If you ever want to sit down and continue the conversation or do it again, like, would love to, because there's so much we tap in on. And I love the good dialogue. Where can people find you to learn more about what you're doing and learn more from you?
Sure. I think so simply you go to purdeepsangha.com. That's my website. I'm most active on LinkedIn, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn at Purdeep Sangha. And then for those of you who are interested in the book, I can give a website there too. It's completemanaudio.com, and if you use the promo code victory 75, so the word victory and then the number 75 all together, you'll get 75% off.
Awesome. I'll include that in the show notes as well. But that's awesome. Readers are leaders, or leaders are readers.
Both ways, yeah.
So go write it down. Go check it out. Um, Pradeep, again, I really appreciate you coming on and spending some time with me and diving into. We hit a few different topics, and we hit on some big topics, and we hit like the top of the iceberg on these. And I think that podcasts are great places to have those. But I will tell you, I also think that a better place to have those conversations and is sitting around with some of your boys and hashing this out and having fun, but having good conversation. because together you're going to be able to go and actually do more and take some action and have a little bit different depth of the conversation than you can in a public setting. And that's very positive. And I'll just touch on one thing. If I can, when we're talking through, and like when I reference handing out those stickers, the other thing that I'm finding, and by the way, if you want some stickers and you want to see something really cool, I will send you some stickers. I'll give you like 5 stickers or whatever. Start handing them out to people, random people. You want to see something cool? I've only, there's always an outlier. I've only had a couple where it's like, yeah, maybe that wasn't cool. Everything else is awesome because it does break a barrier and creates conversation. And in those conversations, what I found is that these topics that we've started talking about, a lot of people are thinking them. They aren't necessarily talking about them because they don't necessarily know who to talk about them with. But a lot of people want to do something. They just don't know how to do it or what to do. And so if people like you and me and you, listener, can start that conversation and start getting people together, then I think some interesting things could happen. And it'd be very positive, both for you as an individual to help that individual fulfillment, as well as your family, because we're building a community that they can then look at, and we create mentorship opportunities in all of those pieces. And then thirdly, it's just more fun. Shoot some gel blasters with your buddies. It's safer than other things. But Purdeep, I appreciate you, man. So much fun. I hope we can stay in touch, and I wish you all the best in what you're continuing to do. Just keep doing it. You're making an impact.
Well, thank you, Zach. I appreciate you having me. This was great. And you're an awesome host, by the way. So
I
you made it
appreciate
easy.
that. Thank you. I did not do my makeup today, so that's a very special comment there. I appreciate it. No, thank you. It was fun. Let's stay in touch, Pradeep, and I'll
Yeah,
look forward to your game show.
yeah, sounds good to me. Maybe we'll be on it together.
Oh, don't tease me. All right. Thanks, Pradeep.
Take care.
All right, guys. I appreciate you listening. If you got to all the way to the end, then you're in it. Like you are in the zone of, okay, let's get better. Like Pradeep was saying, let's do something to make ourselves better so that we can make others better. Because I'm going to use an analogy from a previous episode. But if you're flying in that hypermobile world that you're in, if you have the chance to fly, and then you hit a little turbulence and those little masks fall down, what do they tell you to do? You got your kids with you. They say, put your mask on first and then put it on them. Why is that? Because if you're out of the fight, you can't help anybody else. If you pass out, you're not going to be able to help your kids. So get your oxygen, get that internal fulfillment. And it's not like a greedy fulfillment, like I want to have all the things and stuff. It's like confidence, strength, stepping into awkward with boldness and learning from failure to become better. And then taking what you've learned and apply it to your life, but also to others. Because to what Purdeep was saying, in a mentorship realm, you can make a big impact. And sometimes you will not know that you made that until years down the road. But you'll make zero impact if you don't do a thing. So that's what I'll leave you with. But for those that have been on here over and over, I just want to say thank you. I'm proud of you. And I want to encourage you to go and make waves in whatever world and pool that you're swimming in a good way. Because it's going to start with you, not with me, not with Purdeep. It starts with you. And we appreciate you. So go take these things, see what you can apply in your journey and your life to becoming the skilled dad.